the next 4 minutes. Finished two tough layups through traffic, like taking contact and then finishing layups back to the basket, spin move layups. So he had a mid-range jumper as well around the three-point line. Found Shaden Sharp for just a great bounce pass dime for a Shaden dunk. Which the more and more guys play with Hansen, I think the more they're going to realize, hey, like if I backdoor, if I just make hard cuts, he's going to find me in places, and he was absolutely able to do that with Shaden to get him a great dunk in that game as well. And blocked a Malik Monk shot as time was expiring, made two free throws as well, the last of which gave the Trailblazers a 64-58 lead going into the fourth quarter. Fans going nuts. And Hansen just looking real comfortable. It looked like the Hansen that we saw at Summer League, directing traffic, making plays, playing loose, having fun out there. And I again, every single time that like he did something and the crowd went wild, like you just see like his confidence and his belief in himself kind of grow. And I wouldn't even say confidence necessarily, but just he looked just so much more comfortable every time something kind of worked for him. And again, when things don't work, I imagine there's probably parts of Hansen too, just knowing him just a little bit, where when something doesn't work, or if he has a rough game, particularly in, first game versus the Warriors, it's your first real NBA action, it doesn't really go especially well. And you're maybe thinking to yourself, like, boy, am I ready for this? Like, did I get myself into something here that maybe I'm not prepared for having success in? And then he goes out versus the Kings in that third quarter and looked exactly like the player that the Trailblazers drafted with the 16th overall pick, exactly the player that gave Portland so much confidence in kind of going off the board and getting Hansen when no one else really had him rated, or at least publicly, in the first round. And again, it just goes back to what I've said over and over and over again about Hansen, is that every time there's been a chance for him to kind of come out and not meet expectations, he has done that. And he didn't do that versus the Warriors. So that was the first time in practices or workouts or at the combine or in the U19s or in the CBA or in Summer League where he didn't come out and really look like a player who were like, boy, no wonder they took this guy in the first round. He looks great. Didn't necessarily look that way versus the Warriors. That's the first time that's happened, at least in the short amount of time that Hansen's been with the Trailblazers. But then it did happen versus the Kings game, even in a preseason game. You say to yourself, okay, I get it. I understand why they decided to again, not necessarily take a chance, but to just trust their own scouting and their own reports and their own gut about what they saw out of Hansen. And again, you saw it in the third quarter, in a 6 minute stretch in the third quarter versus the Kings. And again, part of that is just getting comfortable. I think part of it is also the rest of the team getting comfortable with who Hansen is. Like there was one time in that third quarter where he like had the ball up, and I think it was actually maybe when he shot the mid range free throw line jumper. Was he kind of had the ball up and he was looking for guys to pass it to. He was kind of doing that water polo thing where like you're just holding the ball up high and you're just looking around for someone to come open. No one did, and so Hansen was like, all right, and took the jumper. I think his preference would have been for someone to cut. And, other teams know kind of what Hansen is going to try to do after seeing Summer League. So in their scouting report, they're like, hey, when this guy gets the ball, make sure you're on your P's and Q's in terms of your own man, because they're going to try to backdoor. He's going to try to find guys. And so, once I wouldn't say scouted necessarily, but that's something that I guarantee is on the scouting report when you look at it. Hansen's playing right now, so there's going to be some mention of the way that he's playing, and they're going to say like, hey, if he's got the ball, and if you can tell he's looking to create, which he's very often doing, just try not to get backdoored. They were still able to get Shaden for that dunk anyways, but teams are going to counter, and it's going to be on the Blazers to counter it from that as well. And that kind of goes to what I was talking about in terms of the Warriors game, just being a little disappointed that they didn't really kind of give the ball to Hansen and then let him kind of do what he does best. You understand that because they're still going to play within the general dictates of the offense they're running. But I do think that when you see what Hansen's able to do, you probably maybe put in a package or two, or at least when he's out there, say, hey, Hansen, if the ball swings to you and if you want to get out there and kind of make some decisions, you're more than welcome to do that. I think that's probably what it's going to be. The rookie season like for Hansen. I think that's probably how they're going to approach the way that he plays. And then maybe as they get more and more comfortable with him, maybe, and if he has success, then maybe they put in a few more packages here and there. If not, I think they just kind of let it ride. But I think what you saw in that game versus the Kings is a good reason why you maybe just want to play a little bit differently when sometimes when Hansen's in the game. I'm not saying every time. I'm not even saying the majority of the time, but I think part of the time, if you really want to get the best out of what Hansen does, you probably need to maybe kind of change a little bit. Now, granted, they want to play more in motion. They want to play with more ball movement. They want to play with more cuts and passing and more reads. And I think Hansen is the guy that absolutely allows you to do that because he's smart. He has a really good understanding of the confines of a basketball court and kind of how it works and when one guy moves, kind of how that changes where the other guys are out on the court and the spacing. It just seems like he has a real good sense of those things as a 20-year-old. So, I think what you saw out of Hansen, again, it was in 6 minutes and it was just one game versus the Kings, and let's be frank too, like Hansen's got like 6 inches and probably at least 50 pounds on Drew Eubanks, my guy Drew. So, that's part of it as well. But you play who's in front of you, like you can only play who's on your schedule and you can only be defended by the guys who are on the court opposite you. So it's not like that's on Hansen or anything. But, when you consider the way he played and how he looked, I think a lot of enthusiasm, and rightfully so. I just do think it's always important to remember that he is a 20-year-old rookie. That was a preseason game versus the Kings. So, you want to try to keep your expectations in line and you don't want to put too much on him. But again, a lot of reason to feel really good about what you saw out of Hansen in that game versus the Kings. And once again, if that had just been the first time that he ever went out and looked really good in that setting, you'd probably say to yourself, like, well, okay, something to build on there, but we'll see how it goes. But the fact that he's done that in almost every single instance in which he's played with the Trailblazers at this point, other than that Warriors game, I think, again, gives you an indication that that's more of who he is at this point in time than the way he played versus the Warriors. And, the Warriors are a really good team. They're better than the Kings. They're going to be harder to play against than the Kings. So there's obviously that part. And you're going to get the Warriors again because you're going to play them again on Tuesday at Moda Center. So you maybe get a chance to kind of see some growth there or see if it was Hansen being nervous in that first game versus the Warriors, or if it was just what the Warriors did, it's something in between. Either way, a lot of reason to be really excited about what we saw out of Hansen in that game. Obviously, the fans just loved it, and that's a part of it too. Is I think Hansen plays a exciting brand of basketball that people enjoy watching. But the other thing, and I've been saying this for 20 plus years now, Trailblazers fans love rookies. And maybe every team's fans love rookies. Blazers fans love their rookies more than other teams. I firmly believe that. Go back and look. I've been saying it my entire career. We just like young, up and coming players in Portland. The idea of what could be, the idea of there being kind of something on the horizon. I think that just speaks to Blazers fans who are always kind of hoping and wishing and praying that we're going to get to that point at some point in time. So, I think that's part of it as well. But, the energy in the building when Hansen was really going there in the third quarter versus the Kings, I mean, that's a real thing. And, in the post game as well, like cracking some jokes as I posted on Twitter, like really kind of my favorite Hansen joke right now is when Chris starts asking him a question or translating a question. He's like, no, you gotta say it into the microphone. And I think part of it too was, after the game versus the Kings, Chris was like, I know that Hansen understood the question that you just asked, but he still wants me to translate it in Chinese, which makes a lot of sense too, because obviously we have a lot of fans who are in China who are watching these post games and who are watching our games as well. Shout out to all my folks in China. Shout out to all my followers on Red Note. I appreciate it. And so, Hansen's also doing it for the fans back home, and that, we're asking questions in English. And even though Hansen, I think, understands some of those questions, he's still like, no, Chris, you should translate this into Mandarin so that way people can back home can understand what we're talking about, which is pretty funny. Just gives a little taste of his personality as well. The friendship between him and Chris is really great, and I think Chris is doing obviously a great job. But I think having a friendly nature about you with both Hansen and Chris have, I think has really helped that relationship as well. So that's been fun. The other thing I would say too is that when you watched Hansen in that game versus the Kings, he's got the three, he's got that drive where it's pretty slow and methodical, but he understands kind of how to move his body. He understands it's kind of drawing contact and then using it. With those kind of like looping layups that he does to kind of get around his defender, with the way that like he complains to referees. You kind of see you understand the Nikola Jokic comparisons. Like there's definitely times in that third quarter where I was watching, I was like, I get what people are saying. He's not Nikola Jokic. Jokic, one of the best to ever do it. Please don't get me wrong. I'm not saying he's Nikola Jokic. I'm just saying I can understand where people would watch those guys play and say, like, yeah, there's some similarities there, even outside of kind of the style of play. I think some of their mannerisms. I think again, kind of some of the ways they use their body types. Neither one of those guys at this point, especially like trim, muscular dudes. They're guys who more understand how to use their bodies to create an advantage, even if from a physical perspective, it's not an imposing thing. They're not like freak athletes or anything like that. So again, I just, kind of, again, with the long looping layups, the spin move that's kind of like, it's pretty methodical. It's coming, but it's creating space nonetheless. The way he like does the come on referees, can you explain this to me kind of thing? All that pretty Jokic like. So one game, one preseason game versus Sacramento Kings, one quarter of one preseason game versus Sacramento Kings, but it looked pretty good. I understand why people are excited about it. You should be. Keep your expectations in order, I would say, but also it's fun to think about what could be and what Hansen does for this team going forward, both in this season and in seasons in the future. So a really good game versus the Kings.